Somebody's got to win here. What makes you different than your colleagues when it comes to potentially holding the gavel?
Well, exactly how I would say it is. You've got friends who are competing to be the starting quarterback, and there's only going to be one starting quarterback. But we've got, frankly, an embarrassment of riches, not just among those who are running. You know, Frank Lucas and Andy and French are all dear friends. But our entire committee is really a solid group of people. But this is a very important cornerstone to, I think, what the Trump administration is going to be looking for, which is to put the economy back on its feet, to put regulations in place properly, rather than the willy-nilly that we've seen out of Gary Gensler and Marty Grunberg and so many others in the alphabet soup, Rohit Chopra at CFPB. You know, we've got to have a steady hand here, but we also have to have someone who's going to be able to work with our colleagues in the Senate. You know, Tim Scott and I came into Congress together back in 2010, 14 years ago. We were both named to the Financial Services Committee at the time. He's now going to be heading banking. I have had an opportunity to chair 3 subcommittees in my time there. I've served on literally every subcommittee on the committee, including the precursor to what's now the Digital Assets Working Group. It became the Digital Assets Committee because a lot of that fell within our Capital Markets Subcommittee. And we've got some big, audacious issues that we have to deal with, kind of no matter who is in control. The questions around crypto and AI aren't going to go away. But the philosophical side of how we are going to handle the regulators and regulation, both at the international side as well as the domestic side, that's going to be key.
Well, as we consider the composition of the committee here, we actually spoke with one of your Democratic colleagues on it, Congressman Sean Casten of Illinois, yesterday, and he agreed with the kind of characterization of this being a pretty friendly environment, or at least there being cooperation across partisan lines. This is what he told us, sir, and then I have a question for you.
In general, I think the Financial Services Committee has done, in general, a very good job of avoiding some of the more, rancorous, vitriolic debates on some of the other committees. We will certainly have our disagreements on policy issues, and some of those, of course, will be animated.
So as we consider some of these policy issues and the areas where there is opportunity for bipartisan cooperation, Congressman, you just mentioned a few things, including crypto, for example. And we did see market structure legislation advancing out of the committee this Congress, ultimately didn't cross the finish line. Do you see an opportunity for it to do so in the 119th, or will it take a different form now that Republicans have perhaps greater leverage?
Yeah, well, we still do have lame duck. So strange things happen in lame duck. I've lived through this both at the state legislative level as well as the federal level. But I think certainly it's going to have a different tone, at least there's a different flavor to it, hopefully the same tone, because by definition, in the Senate, you're going to need to get some type of bipartisan buy-in. I had a chance to talk with Cynthia Lomas earlier this week at a reception. She and I had served together in the House and know each other pretty well. And we talked about sort of what is going to be happening in that space. We need, as they always joke around, the Democrats are my opponents, but the Senate is our enemy, and the House of Representatives. We are going to have to make sure that we've got good relationships, not just across the aisle in the House, but also down the hall in the Senate. And that I think is going to be paramount. But, also, obviously, the Trump administration in its discussions about creating a crypto-focused whatever we're going to call it, czar for right now. I don't know that it's going to be cabinet level, but it's certainly someone who's going to be coming in and influencing and affecting what the policy is. That's going to be important to make sure that we have a group of people who are going to be able to work together. And so for us in the House, that means the Financial Services and the Ag Committee, as we're dealing with the securities versus commodity question. Same thing in the Senate. And then obviously we got to make sure that ultimately we have the United States be the place where innovation happens rather than it occurring offshore.
Well, you pointed us right to this idea of a crypto czar, Congressman, that we wanted to ask you about as part of our discussion before we had a chance to talk with you here on Bloomberg TV and radio. What do you make of this idea? You've got to replace Gary Gensler. There's a lot to figure out in terms of regulation. Now we add a czar to the mix. What type of authority should that person have? Should they be from Washington or from industry?
Probably, I would suspect it'll be from industry. We got plenty of DC types weighing in on this. And by the way, Gary Gensler, when he was head of the CFTC, viewed it as a commodity. And then when he became head of the SEC, it suddenly magically became a security. And here's the thing. We want to declare it fish or fowl here in Washington, D.C., but crypto assets tend to be more like a platypus, right? It's got characteristics of both and some oddities to them both. So we're going to have to make sure that we aren't backward looking. That is something that I've been cautioning for a long time. We have to be forward looking on this. And I'm sorry to my colleagues who are crypto deniers, who don't believe that there's a future to it or that there should be one. The world has moved well beyond them. That is ancient thinking that isn't going to get us anywhere. So, we've got to make sure that we have somebody who's going to be able to coordinate and hopefully understand the legislative process, because unlike most things in life and certainly most things in business, I'm a small business owner. I have an understanding of what it means to make those kinds of business decisions. Washington, D.C. political decisions and policy decisions are very, very different. And only here does the math not work the way it does in the real world. But also, this is the only organization I've ever been a part of where the sum is actually less than its parts sometimes. You get great ideas and great people, and they come together, and it just sort of falls apart. So we're going to need some people that are very persistent, patient, able to work through and compromise on those things that can and need to be compromised on, but have a clear vision about making the United States the place to be innovative and forward thinking when it comes to crypto, in my mind.
So we'll see what comes in this space in the next Congress and next administration. But as you so rightly reminded us, there is still the 118th Congress to finish out and a funding battle that needs to be resolved. Congressman, how do you think this ends? Is this going to be a continuing resolution that punts this into the early aughts of Trump's second administration, or should there be a clean break, sort some funding bills, whether it's an omnibus or otherwise, and give him a fresh start when he takes the oath?
Well, great to be with you. I'm going to hang up now. No, I'm just kidding. I'll stick with you. But it is frankly the question that we were struggling with this week. We've been struggling with this. And really, I think we need to hear from President Trump as to whether he would like to have those decks cleared. Maybe not in quite the shape that I would personally like to see it, or he would like to personally see it. But, this first 150 days, we're going to have to be moving very sure-footedly and quickly on so many things. And to have a debt ceiling, to have government funding hanging out there, to have what could be some very serious damage done to DOD and some of those projects. We've got to think very, very sharply about that. And I think the president's going to have to weigh in as to what his preference would be on that. Are we going to pull our eyes off the ball? For me personally, I think having something longer that is decisive and takes care of it allows us to focus in on those things, just as we were talking about. We've got Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, with many of those provisions that are expiring. We've got regulators that need to be replaced, from Marty Gruenberg to now Gary Gensler announced that he will be leaving as well. So the Senate's going to be dealing actively with so many of those appointments. Personally, I'd rather kind of clear the decks and then live to fight another better day, more sure-footed day when we have the House, the Senate, and the White House all in agreement, because we've got real reforms that need to happen, and they're not going to happen with Chuck Schumer leading the band, I can tell you, in the Senate. But we're going to have to really make sure that we're focused in laser-like on so many different issues.